Hello and welcome to this demo about how to review a preprint or to request a review of a preprint on prereview.org. My name's Chad Sansing. I'm the head of product at PREreview. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm excited to take this tour with you today. The first thing you might notice is that once again, we're on sandbox.prereview.org. This is our testing environment, so anything we do here will seem just like it does on prereview.org, our production site. However, nothing we do here will actually be published or become permanent, so to speak. So this is a great place to play around, to test out the site, to better understand how the review workflows work before you're ready to publish your first pre-review on prereview.org. The first step in reviewing a preprint is going to be to click on the Review a Preprint button. And there we'll be asked for the DOI of the preprint we'd like to review. What is a DOI? Well, there's a bit of helper text there. It's that digital object identifier. These usually appear above a preprint or in the metadata on the side of a preprint as it's displayed on a repository or a preprint server. We're going to review a preprint from Cielo Preprints today. We'll paste in the address and hit continue. And then we get a little window showing just the abstract so we can make sure this is indeed the preprint we would like to review. And if it is, we can hit start now. So the next step is to decide how you'd like to start your pre-review. You can start with prompts, in which case we'll give you a series of prompts you can respond to. This is otherwise known as a structured pre-review. You can also start with a template, or you can let us know that you've already written the review somewhere else, in which case you'd just like to copy and paste it. So if I've done that, I can choose this option. I'm then going to get a question asking me to declare my use of artificial intelligence. Basically, on prereview.org, if you're using AI to help edit for something, linguistic, something like that, maybe moving between languages, makes a lot of sense to us. If you happen to be using AI to generate the ideas, the structure, to create the review for you in any way, we do ask you to declare it. In that case, what will happen is your review will get a public domain license, a Creative Commons 0 license, rather than a Creative Commons attribution license. And we will not push that pre-review to your ORCID profile if you've opted in to our ORCID integration, just because it's unsure how much of that review is written by a machine trained on other people's writing or by you. So you can still publish that review if you declare that you've used AI to come up with the ideas, the structure, the review itself. However, if you're just using AI to maybe clean up some language, you're moving between languages, that's fine. You do not have to declare AI use for that kind of limited editorial use. It's just when you're coming up with new ideas that are not your own, that's when we ask you to declare your use of AI. And again, the review will still be published. It just won't be licensed or accredited the same way. So I'm going to say no, we've not used AI for this. And then we're going to get this wide open text editor box. And I would just put test here, something like that. I'd hit save and continue. I'd get a few more questions to answer about competing interests, about following the code of conduct on pre-review, and then a chance to check all of my work to make sure everything is just so before I finally publish, get notification that I have successfully published, get my DOI, all that good stuff. So that's how it looks if you've already written your review. Of course, maybe you'd just like to use a lightweight template, in which case you'll get that same box, a little bit more helper text up here, including examples of good reviewer behavior, helpful review sections, and then you can add a summary. You can add the major issues you have in your review, as well as the minor issues you have with the preprint in your review, and then hit save and continue to go on. Or if you'd like a more structured experience, perhaps you're new to peer review, or you'd like to learn more about the kinds of questions that are often answered in a review on prereview.org or elsewhere, you can go ahead and click on with prompts. And this is the workflow we'll follow for the rest of this demo. And we'll catch up with the other options towards the end, again, when we get to those questions about competing interests and the like. So I would love to have some prompts. And when I click on that, we're going to get things split up into one question at a time. So the first one, does the introduction explain the objective of the research presented in the preprint? I'm going to say, yeah, it does, clearly. And when I click on my choice, I'll get the text box where I can add more comments, more feedback. This is where you can add suggestions to authors, for example. I'll hit save and continue. I'm taken to the next question about methods. And I'm just going to say, I'm going to give the positive answers throughout this review. It's just a test. I'll save and continue. A question about, are the conclusions supported by the data? We'll say, sure, absolutely. Are the data presentations, so things like visualizations, are they well suited to represent what they're representing? We'll say, yeah, absolutely. Highly appropriately and clear. Again, we'll just give test for the feedback. But if you were going to say something like it's somewhat inappropriate or unclear, you could explain why using, constructive generative language to help the author revise towards a better next draft of the research. How clearly do authors discuss, explain, and interpret their findings? We'll say very clearly. Is the preprint likely to advance academic knowledge? We'll say, yes. Would it benefit from language editing? So if you say no, that means maybe some minor issues. Nothing is getting in the way of understanding the author, though. But you could also say yes, there are some linguistic errors here that kind of get in the way of meaning, and then you could suggest how to correct them. Would you recommend the preprint to others? Say yes. Say yeah, maybe with a little bit of improvement, or maybe like no, not yet because of its quality or the number of flaws that it has. And again, each time you'll have an opportunity to explain what you mean and to help the author with substantive, constructive feedback. Is it ready for attention from an editor, publisher, broader audience? Again, you can say, sure, just like it is. Yes, after a few changes, or no, it needs some major revisions first. You can choose which name you'd like to use. Along with your pre-review account, you get your public persona. You also get a pseudonym that you can use if ever you'd like to offer feedback, maybe without the risk of retaliation, let's say, from maybe a researcher, an author that you worry is going to be upset by even the kindest or most constructive of feedback, something like that. You want to keep your pseudonym secret, of course. I use mine for demoing all the time, so it's no problem for you to see it here. How about we'll make this public for me. And again, if you have questions about what is that pseudonym again, there's some helper text there. You now have a chance to share if you reviewed this preprint with anyone else. No, I reviewed it alone. Yes, but they don't want to be listed as authors. Or yes, and they would like to be listed as authors. Just to give us an idea of how that shows up, I'm going to click on, yep, they want to be listed as authors and they have read and approved the pre-review. I'm going to affirm that. And then I'm going to hit save and continue. And then I can add, authors' names and emails on each line. So I'll put something like my Gmail address here, something like that. I'll save and continue. And I'll say, yep, I've checked it. I do not want to add anybody else. I'll continue. And on the back end from us, those authors will now get automated emails inviting them to let pre-review know if they'd like to use their public persona or their pseudonym. And once they've made that choice, they'll be accredited on the review in that way. And we, as human members of the pre-reviewed hour team, we'll never see that. That's a fully automated process. We only ever access any pseudonym in the case of a code of conduct violation. Otherwise, we keep ourselves blissfully unaware of who's who there to preserve that kind of protective nature of the pseudonyms. We have an opportunity here to share any competing interests we have and some helper text to let us understand what those are. I'm going to say no competing interests here. We can affirm that we are following the pre-review code of conduct. Pseudonyms are not there to protect folks from being bad actors or from being mean to one another or attacking one another on the platform. So we do share examples of the expected and unacceptable behaviors here for anyone maybe who hasn't gone through and read the entire code of conduct yet, though it's linked. I'm going to affirm that I'm following the code of conduct, save and continue. And then I have an opportunity to check everything before I publish. Make sure that I am reviewing the correct preprint, Make sure that the details here are the details I want to have used for authorship, accreditation, and my affirmations that I'm not using AI and that I do not have competing interests. I can then review my answers to each question, as well as the text that I typed in response to each prompt. And I can go back and change any of these things that I'd like. I can edit the review before publishing it. And then finally, I can publish it. And since I did not use AI to come up with the ideas here, it will get that CC BY license. So I'll publish. PREreview.org and Zenodo will shake hands in the background to get it published. And in just a moment, we'll get this success screen. I'll get the DOI that's been minted. This is not really the DOI because this is not really the review. Again, this is all done on sandbox.prereview.org, our testing environment. We do get a little bit of information about what happens next, where this review is going to show up. There are some encouragements here to share your review on different social media where pre-review is also present and can amplify that if you would like. We don't have to, of course. And you can let us know how it went. You can schedule a user research interview with me as head of product, or you can complete a brief anonymous survey to let us know about your experience with that publication workflow. And once you've done all that, you can go back to the preprint, which will be displayed in a 2-column fashion on prereview.org with the preprint abstract on one side, and on the other side, little previews of each of the reviews written for it. And that is the publication workflow for reviewing a preprint on prereview.org. And if I go back to prereview.org, Sandbox in this case, and if I click on request a review instead of reviewing a preprint, so for example, let's say I'm the author of the preprint we just reviewed, I can click on request a review instead. If I would like the pre-review community to consider publishing a review of my preprint, I can paste that URL in right there. And then I can go ahead and request it. Once I confirm, yep, that's mine, that's the title. Now, you don't have to be the author of the preprint to request a review of it. You might be an editor. You might be someone who has an interest in that research field. Anyone can request a review, but often authors make that request. We have partnerships with Cielo Preprints, with preprints.org and BioArchive, where authors can make that request when they deposit a preprint on those servers. So oftentimes the requests are coming from authors themselves, and by completing one of those requested reviews, you're really helping them out with that substantial and constructive feedback that will improve their work. But I'll go ahead and make that request. And then on Sandbox, it's going to tell us page not found, but on prereview.org itself, the production site, you would get a notification that your request has made it through. All right, and that, somewhat briefly, is how to review a preprint or to request the review of a preprint on prereview.org. If you're curious about getting started with either of those things, again, you can visit sandbox.prereview.org to play around, to test things out without worrying about doing anything too permanent. And when you're ready, you can move over to our production site, prereview.org, to publish that pre-review or to make that request to use the other features on the site. Thanks so much for joining me on that tour of reviewing preprints and requesting reviews of preprints on prereview.org. Got another demo coming up very shortly on reviewing datasets on prereview.org. I hope you'll join us for that one too. Bye-bye.